And actually, I always like to say it's storytelling, but it's also story sharing.
Oh, yeah.
I find storytelling when I'm teaching a class or speaking at a conference, that's storytelling because it's unilateral. I'm giving something to the audience or to my students. Story sharing is where I want to know about your experiences. And exactly what we're doing right now is story sharing, which is I'll talk about something and you'll layer in a story. I'll layer in something and it's back and forth. And
welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we're passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast during the summer of 2020 at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my friends, family, and social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. My goal was to do the same for my listeners. But as I chatted with my guests throughout the first year, I discovered that their personal stories were the most fascinating thing about each episode. Neil Gaiman says, "Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten." I now know that sharing our experiences with others helps us defeat our own dragons. It is our stories that connect us to one another. Let's see what wisdom today's guest has to share with us. I haven't even welcomed you to the show yet.
no.
This is episode 34, I believe, and okay. I'm talking with Sam Thiara. And Sam, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Lucinda, for having me here. And I appreciate being here and being able to share my stories with your audience.
I know, I'm excited too. So we were just now talking about India, and it was such a interesting experience being there. Because it was so beautiful. So there were so many fascinating, wonderful things about it. And then there were all these people sleeping on the street. Yeah. And I don't know, there was a sort of a like disconnect in my head about it.
Totally. And even with myself as well. I mean, I was born in England, raised in Canada. My parents come from Fiji Islands, which is near Australia.
Yeah.
And my ancestral roots go back to India. And when I went to India for the first time, exactly to what your point was, that I saw the magnificence and the glory of India, but I also saw the hardships and the poverty. But I'm not sure if you also noticed this as well, but one thing that just really struck a chord with me is the poverty was very difficult to see. But you know what? It is part of the fabric that is India, but the resilience of the people who just are, like you say, were sleeping on the streets, so there was this resilience, but there was also a smile that they always had for you. And that's the part that I just sort of was like taken aback, because they have worries. We have worries, but their worries are more of survivalist mode. Our worries are more of, this idea, that idea, and whatnot. I mean, they're similar, but they're miles apart. But I just saw so much resilience from people there.
I did too. Before we started recording, we were talking about the Taj Mahal and going to see that. And when Barry and I took the government tour, we were in Delhi. And we had to get on the bus really, really early in the morning. And so it was that dusk right before the sun comes up. And the bus was sitting next to this public like spigot. And there were all these people who were sleeping on the street, who were lined up to wash up for the day. And homeless people here in the United States, I was like, I'm not sure homeless people in the United States go seek out a shower I mean, I'm sure some of them do, but
sure,
not all of them. Because when I was going to Portland State, I would get off the bus and I'd have to walk several blocks, about half a mile to get to the campus. And homeless people would stop me for change, and you could smell them coming.
Yeah. And I think India for myself, like when I wrote my book, Lost and Found, Seeking the Past and Finding Myself, for what we're talking about, I think this small quote I want to share with you really captures the essence of what you and I are talking about. The quote is, travel isn't always pretty. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts. It even breaks your heart. But that's okay. The journey changes you. It should change you. It leaves marks on your memory, on your consciousness, on your heart, and on your body. You take something with you. Hopefully, you leave something good behind. And that was by Anthony Bourdain. And I just thought that really captured the essence of my journey to India to find my ancestral roots, but also to find myself.
Well, India was just part of our trip. We took a trip circumnavigating the globe. So we stopped in several countries. And you're right. He's right. Travel changes you. It doesn't matter if you're traveling from the place you live to another part of the country that you live in. It's because in the United States, we have so many different cultures, if you want to call them that. And I'm sure that's the way it is in every single country. You have a little bit of different dialects and, and different foods that people like to eat. And, it's just.
Well, and one thing that really resonated for me, and I write about it in the book, is it helped me to distinguish between being a traveler and a tourist. And there's nothing wrong with being a tourist where you want to be, you want to see, but you don't want to experience. And then a traveler who's just like, no, I have to experience. I have to see the poverty. I have to, my wife is a tourist. I'm a traveler. And you can always see this challenge that we have, because I'll sit at a dhaba, which is a roadside cafe, and I'll have the food that's cooked there. And she will just be like, nope, I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, look, it's been deep fried. Anything that you put into this fryer, it's killed everything. But she's like, nope. So she's the tourist and I'm the traveler. I mean, and this is the experience I've had in so many of my journeys that I've taken to different parts of the world, whether it was sleeping on the Great Wall of China overnight, whether it was going into the pyramids of Egypt, inside the pyramids, or, seeing a gray whale in the wild. I mean, I need to experience. And I think that's why I said, but I want to be careful not to say that makes me better than a tourist. No, tourists, totally fine. They want to see and, have those memories and those stories, and that's great. But then there's the other part, which is the traveler. And like I said, my wife and I are totally different when it comes to that.
Well, I'm fortunate. Barry and I guess are both travelers. Because even going up to his brother's 60th, we surprised his brother for his 60th birthday in Missouri during this just a few weeks ago. And we said, this time when we drive up there, let's stop off and see some of these places and experience some of these places that we really have wanted to go to. Usually we just sort of zip up there in a couple of days. And we like to seek out local places to eat instead of the chain restaurants, So we found this really great place to eat. It was, I don't usually eat hamburgers, but because I can't eat the bun, but I got a hamburger at this place. I can't even remember the name of the town. And it was just this local place, and it was the best hamburger. And, the people were friendly and it was great. Yeah.
Well, and it's also interesting because, I've done numerous travels to the Middle East for work. And I just remember the first time I went there, the number of people who said, you're crazy. You're going to part of the most dangerous parts of the world. And I said, well, because I was landing in Kuwait, and that time Iraq was going through major upheaval, and Kuwait is right next to Iraq. And people said, you're crazy. You're going to a really dangerous place. And, the region is not just Kuwait, but the region. So I went there, and I remember I came back and people said, oh my gosh, okay, so what was it like? How dangerous was it? I said, you're not going to believe how dangerous this place is. And they're like, really, what was it like? Like, what did you see? And I said, I tried to cross the road and it was just so dangerous. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, there's no road safety. It's really difficult to cross the road. And they're like, yeah, but what about what the news talks about? And I said, no, do you know what? It's the safest place in the world. I am safer. And not because I look like I come from there, but even my Canadian friends, Caucasians, were safe at midnight walking around the streets. Now, Lucinda, there is something extremely dangerous in the Middle East. It's lurking. And I share this with people because it is something that you have to be very careful of. And what that is I finished speaking at a conference and on a Thursday, and I'm leaving on Saturday. So one of the conference goers, she's become a really good, dear friend of mine. And she said, I'm going to take you around Bahrain on Friday. So she came to pick me up in the morning. And she just, when I arrived to the car, she goes, Sam, I'm sorry, but plans have changed. And I'm like, oh, well, I mean, if you have to go, do your stuff, I'll just putter around and I'll find things to see. She said, no. My mom says I have to bring you home for lunch. So I went to a Bahraini house for lunch with a mother who's cooked an entire meal. The entire table is covered in food. And she's sitting with a spoon, sitting across from me with this beautiful grin, waiting for me to start eating. And she's not going to ask me, what do I want? She's heaving stuff into my plate. That's dangerous because of the amount of food she's putting on your plate. My recommendation, eat slow.
I love that. Oh, I bet it was delicious, though.
Oh, it was extremely delicious, but you just sort of have to eat really slow. And whether, and I've seen this, whether you're in Bahrain, China, India, Thailand, if you sit across from any mother, I'm sorry, but that's dangerous because she's going to feed you until that's it. Like you are about ready to explode. I mean, it's just that love and hospitality. But I always tell people jokingly, like that's the most dangerous part of the Middle East, apart from the road safety.
Yes, really. Oh, that was scary in India. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I know. It's almost like you're playing an arcade game or a video game where you're trying to cross the road and you're trying to, you take 2 steps, cars going in front of you, cars behind you. You take 2 more steps, cars in front. Maybe there's an ox cart going behind you now and a tuk-tuk going in front. Yes.
Right. Or a little moped with a whole family on it or...
Oh, yeah. Yeah. A family of 5 on a moped.
Oh, yeah. It was, but being in the vehicle and, going fast, and then being so close to the vehicle in front of you, that was scary. Because I'm the kind of driver that likes to leave a lot of space in between me and the car in front of me.
No.
But I kind of know what you mean, because in Greece it was like that. Everyone was very hospitable and wanted you to try their food, and it was great.
Yes. Yeah. So, but we reciprocate when we have people over. Oh yeah, no. We're making a huge array of food, even if it's for a snack.
Oh, that's great. I love it. Might have to go visit your house.
I think so.
So the reason I wanted you to be on Story Power is because you were saying that you really love storytelling. And I watched a couple of your TED Talks and I looked at your website and I'm like, Sam, you're doing so much stuff. I don't even know where to begin. But I thought, well, I'll begin with the storytelling. That's where I'll begin to talk to you. We've already started talking, but I do want to know more about what you think about storytelling and why you love it and what you do with it.
Sure. And actually, I always like to say it's storytelling, but it's also story sharing.
Oh, yeah.
I find storytelling when I'm teaching a class or speaking at a conference, that's storytelling because it's unilateral. I'm giving something to the audience or to my students. Story sharing is where I want to know about your experiences. And exactly what we're doing right now is story sharing, which is I'll talk about something and you'll layer in a story. I'll layer in something and it's back and forth. And I just remember story sharing and storytelling, I think, is such a powerful tool in communication. And the reason I say that is, if I was to just teach a class in organizational behavior and just talk about the lecture and the theories and everything, I think there's limited application piece or retention. Mm-hmm. But when you apply a story, an example of something that I experienced, all of a sudden that theory and concept suddenly becomes real, because now you've applied it to, here's an example of how this actually happens in real life. Mm-hmm. And I find that even from a teaching perspective, I always put one of the first slides I put up in week 1, theory. I always say myth, theory, and practice. Mm-hmm. Myth is what we believe the world to be. Theory is a logical explanation, but it hasn't really been proven. And practice is taking that theory and does it work? And that's where the stories come in. And that's why in my first TEDx speech, I spoke about storytelling, because when I was asked to speak at TEDx SFU, then people said, so what's your topic? I said, well, I'm thinking about all these different things. And they said, look, you tell stories. How can I tell stories? And then that prompted me to come up with this idea of, we live in a world that's ordinary. In other words, every day we're on a routine, we do the same things, and we go through a process. But embedded in these routines or the ordinary are these tremendously extraordinary experiences. Now, it's great that this is what I've been able to do, but how do you capture that? So I came up with a concept that I called carpe, as in carpe diem. So carpe diem is seize the day, but carpe is how I build my stories and how I've helped people build their own stories, because carpe stands for curiosity, appreciation, reflection, perspective, and experience. So I go through life with curiosity. So as I'm walking down a pathway or somewhere, I'll see something and it stops me. That's the curiosity piece. And when I'm stopped looking at something, all of a sudden I appreciate it for more than what it is. Mm-hmm. And then I add purpose and meaning to it, and that's reflection. And then perspective is adding purpose and meaning to the reflection. And then experience is cataloging it and capturing it as a story. Mm-hmm. And if you've seen the TEDx, I used the analogy of a wooden wedge doorstop. Mm-hmm. I mean,
I love that.
Well, I mean, we go through building doors and whatnot, and there's always this wooden wedge doorstop that's just wedged underneath it. And how many times have we walked through a door and it's been held open by a wooden wedge doorstop? Mm-hmm. I just remember when I was going to teach my class, the outside door was propped open with this wooden wedge doorstop, and I stopped and I looked at it. There's the curiosity bit. I just stopped and looked at it. Mm-hmm. And I started appreciating that doorstop, but I didn't know why, but I was appreciating it for more than what it was as a wooden wedge doorstop. Then I'm standing there adding reflection to it, thinking about it. And I can imagine people looking from their office going like, is he okay? Like, he's standing there looking at the door. Is he coming in, or is he going to just hang out? Like, what's he doing? And, so I was reflecting on this idea. And then perspectives was thinking about all of the things that I've accumulated over the years. And it suddenly, it hit me. It made me realize what the situation was. The wooden wedge doorstop holds the door open for me so I can enter a building. What about all the people that have helped me in life and career, who have held the door open for me? They are my wooden wedge doorstops in my life. I will never call them wooden wedge doorstops, but literally that's what they are. That's what they've done. That wooden wedge doorstop is representative of the people who have helped me in my journey. Mm-hmm. Now, the E, which is experience, is cataloging all of this as an experience, because if you don't capture it, your story is going to die this untimely death. And I remember capturing it, saying, this is important. And then I unfortunately took that doorstop and used it in my TEDx speech. And, it was important as a prop in that way that I described it.
Oh, I was thinking as you were talking, we were keeping the door open on acting class last Friday, only I was using a rock.
Solid, stable.
And then as we were having class, the wind caught the door or something, and the rock and the door just slid across the sidewalk. And I was like, and we said, oh, there's a ghost out there. In Arizona, you use rocks. But that is so, I loved that. And when I heard you talk about that on your TED Talk, because curiosity got to me right off the bat, because my husband is actually the one who found this and wanted to watch it first. Ted Lasso, and on Apple Plus. And it's about this guy from Texas or Kansas or someplace, I think he's from Kansas, who is hired to coach a soccer quote / football team in England. And he's coached American football, but he doesn't know anything about football in England. And so, but during season 1, he is totally underestimated by a lot of people in England. And he happens to be quite a good coach, doesn't matter what he's coaching, because he understands human nature. And so he tells this story about, yeah, people have underestimated me my whole entire life. And it used to really bother me. And then one day I was driving my son to school and I saw this thing on the side, painted on the side of a wall. And it was a quote from Walt Whitman: be curious, not judgmental. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I really liked that. And I got to thinking about it. And he says, yeah, I realized that the people who underestimate me were judgmental. They weren't curious about who I was. Well, that really applied to the situation that he was in at the moment. And I got to thinking about that. I wrote a whole blog post about being curious, because my father was very curious about everything. He wanted to know everything. And so he taught me how to be curious too. And I guess that's why when I am starting my podcasts, I just start talking to people and I want to know about them. And I do that with my students, and I want to hear their stories, and I want to hear what movies they're interested in, or, because I'm in theater. We talk about movies and books and plays and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I love that curiosity. And I just thought that everything else was so right on, because we do need to reflect on our lives. I loved the way you talked about that. And I've known people who don't. And I feel so sad about that.
Well, and one thing I do in my class is I make every single student in week 2, and then we revisit it in week 11, write a personal statement. Tell me who you are. I don't want a running resume, but I want you, if you and I meet for the first time, how are you going to introduce yourself to me? And they tell me it's one of the hardest exercises they've had to do, because now I'm not asking, what are you going to do? I'm asking, who are you? And, that's one of the things that I've done. I do about 3 to 8 conversations a week to help people really understand and discover who they are. And they've got these stories, and we need to share our stories. And when I wrote my first book on personal storytelling, I remember one of the first things I wrote was, what's the last story? What's the last story you read? What's the last story that you told? What's the last story that you lived? And that last one is the most important part, because I think we forget that we are living stories.
I know. I was very fortunate to interview a couple of women, and it aired, I think, in June or early July. And they live in Douglas, or they are part of the Douglas Oral History Project. They started it. These two women with another woman, and they just have people from Douglas, Arizona, come in and tell their stories. And I mean, I wanted to weep at points, because it's like, that's so beautiful. And because they say just exactly what you said. The people will come in and they say, well, I'm not very interesting. And then they start telling their stories and the stories of their families and how their families came to the United States and how some of them were fighting Pancho Villa and, stuff like that. It's like, whoa, that's so interesting. And they don't think they're interesting. I think humans, unless we're narcissistic, don't think we are interesting, but I find people fascinating.
Yeah, no. And that's where once you sit down and I just generally start, what would you like to talk about today? I don't even start talking about what I do or anything. Mm-hmm. What do you want to talk about today? And then we start a conversation and we layer in and we layer into each other's stories and we build upon it. And it's beautiful when we have these conversations because it's made me a richer individual, not because that's why I do it, but I'm surrounded by greatness. Mm-hmm. And it's also about helping people realize how important they are.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and their stories are important. And, my father died in 2004. And when I was listening to the women talk, I thought, I wish I knew more stories from my dad. I mean, I cherish the ones that I have, but I just wish I had more. I wish I had more of my grandparents' stories. I wish I had more,
Well, and to your point, that's exactly why I wrote Lost and Found, Seeking the Past, Finding Myself, is because of that reason. I mean, all I had to go by to find my grandfather's house was a faded photograph and little else. I mean, we had a name of a village. We had a town that maybe was about 6 miles away and the district. But I remember speaking to a lot of people who are from even that town that's only about 5-6 miles away. And they're like, no, never heard of that village before. I think you're wrong. The name may have changed. And trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together was really difficult because, here I'm talking to my parents and my extended family members about, well, tell me about my grandfather and his journey. And, people... It's always so funny because I write about it in the book is, you sit there with a bunch of elders and you pose the question and they start sharing little bits and nuggets and you're trying to capture it. And all of a sudden the conversation starts sliding to, oh, do you remember when we went down to this water hole and so-and-so happened and this happened? And then the other person will be like, yeah, and there was this mango tree and we did this. I'm like, guys, back to the story. Tell me about grandfather. But no, I let them have their moment as well to just relish in their history, their own oral history. But it was also really funny because it's like, but there's assumptions you might have to start making. Like my grandfather left Punjab, which is a landlocked part of India, when he was like 17 years old, and I mean, I don't even know how he did this. I mean, in India, especially in Punjab, it's all landlocked. Just to go from one village to another is like literally a trek or, it's difficult. He went all the way from there, his village, to Calcutta, hopped on a steamer ship, and he hopped on a steamer ship on his way to Argentina for cattle ranching. Well, the boat stopped in Fiji. And this is the part where now you have to start making assumptions because they never asked their father why you wound up in Fiji, which is where my father's born and my mom. But I mean, there's 3 possibilities. Number one, he comes from a landlocked part of the world. Maybe he had enough of sea travel and said, that's it, I'm done. I have to get off here. I'm just tired of this. Or the second reason, maybe, you know what? He saw Fiji as this beautiful paradise, which it is, and said, you know what? I think I'm just going to get off here. Or third thing, maybe he thought this was Argentina, got off the boat, the ship left, and he's like, wait, what? This isn't Argentina? Where's the cattle ranching? So we don't know exactly. And, you make some assumptions and you try to fill in what you can. So for anybody who's listening, capture the stories and talk to the people before the stories start evaporating and disappearing. Yeah.
Well, isn't the Punjab in the mountains?
It's sort of this breadbasket of an area. So just north of it, and in that it's partially in there, it starts layering into Nepal and those parts. So it's relatively flat, but there are parts that are mountainous as well, and it starts going towards Nepal.
Oh, right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where the what's the name of the city where the Golden Temple is? Is that up in
Amritsar?
Amritsar, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's in Punjab as well.
Yeah, we didn't go up there. That would have been fun.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah. But we stayed in in Delhi, and we only stayed for about a week, and then we went on to Australia.
Okay.
From there. We have friends who live in Australia. So, but yes, I would like to go back now. I think I'm ready now after 25 years to go back to India and see it again.
Yeah. I would love to go back. Well, you're visiting literally a continent when you visit India. It's like if you go to Africa, Africa is made up of so many different components. India, while it's a country, not a continent, is made up of so many different components that how do you experience it? The North is totally different than the South. The East is totally different than the West. So it's like you get so much exposure.
Yes, really. Well, I mean, it's like that with almost every country, unless it's really, really small. But it was kind of like that when we were in. It was like that in Germany, and England is like that, and France is like that. Although we were only in Paris, but yeah, I mean, it's like that in every country that we went to. The United States obviously was like that. Because, I grew up in the Northwest. So when I started teaching in Douglas specifically, where most of the students are of Mexican descent and speak Spanish as their first language, a lot of them. And they were talking about the quinceañera. And I'm like, quinceañera, tell me what that is. And they're like, Miss, you don't know what that is? And I'm like, well, I grew up in the Northwest. If you want to know about, salmon runs and, stuff like that, I could tell you that. But so they had to, educate me about that. And I just talked on my podcast with one of my former students. She teaches folklorico. And I didn't really ask about that either. I just watched the dances. And so she had to explain that to me. And was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. So, Mexico has all these different regions and different foods, and it's the same everywhere. I mean, in that one region has their culture, if you want to call it that, and another region has their culture. And And so that's one of the things that's so cool about travel.
Oh, yeah. You get to experience the tapestry of the culture and the background. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing. I'm just anxious to get back to the travel route. I feel like I've been a caged bird for a year and a half almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert, so it's been really wonderful. And that's when I started my podcast, and it's something that I can do at home.
Very cool.
Well, do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Sure. I mean, one thing that I really love to share, and I share this with so many people, is I want people to realize how important they are. And I actually came up with this analogy, and it actually emerged out of that first TEDx speech that I did about discover the extraordinary in the ordinary. So what I do is I carry with me puzzle pieces, and I hold puzzle pieces in my hand, and after I finish my last lecture, or if I'm at a conference, I'll leave this as the last piece. And I always say, if I was to give you a single piece of a jigsaw puzzle, what can you do with one piece? People look at me going like, well, not much. It's one piece. And I said, okay, but this one piece is representative and reflective of you as an individual. Because you are this single piece of a jigsaw puzzle. You don't know where you fit in. You don't know what the bigger picture is. It's ordinary. And then I tell people, right before your eyes, magically, I'm going to transform it into something extraordinary. Because I think sometimes we are so focused as that single piece of a jigsaw puzzle. What we don't realize is I hold a satchel, and it's a black bag that's got multiple pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. If I give you a single piece of a jigsaw puzzle, do you now realize that my puzzle will be permanently incomplete without you? I can't finish my journey. I can't finish my puzzle without you. And I physically see a transformation on the person's face because they now realize how important they are to me. It's been about 5,000 pieces in the world to date to remind people how important they are. And people have told me it's taped to my mirror so that every morning I wake up and I see that piece of a jigsaw puzzle, it reminds me someone told me I mattered. It's traveled in backpacks around the world. It's in wallets where they see me at an event and they show me that they still hold this puzzle piece. It's in curio boxes. And, in my last lecture, I carve out the last 30 minutes to talk about life and career, about these really strong, purposeful, meaningful pieces. And the puzzle analogy is the last thing. And when I'm finished my lecture, I say, okay, that's it. We're done for the semester. And I start packing my stuff. I look up and they're lined up to grab a piece of the puzzle. It's just a simple analogy that I've really been amazed at how powerful it's been. I've even heard from people who have gone through depression and really difficult times. And they said when they were in their deepest, darkest moments, that puzzle piece was there. It wasn't the only thing that got them out of it, but they just said it reminded me that I am part of someone's bigger puzzle and I need to be a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a simple piece that I remind people how important they are. And the other thing that I want to share is we're in this pandemic and, it's impacted every single person and people in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And I came up with this acronym, and as you know, I love acronyms because I keep coming up with them. But I said that there's a need for us to care right now to help us get through the pandemic. And CARE stands for collaboration, adaptability, resilience, and empathy. Collaboration is this whole idea that I have something to offer, you have something to offer, we need to share. Mm-hmm. Adaptability is we've had to go to be adaptable. Things have changed all around us, and we've needed to shift and change, and we've gotten used to being adaptable. Resilience is this whole aspect of it's a marathon. We're not over. It's not over today, tomorrow, or next week. This is a marathon. We build resilience into our life.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, empathy. Let's show care and compassion to the people around us because you don't know what people are going through. And the puzzle analogy with care, I think, really goes hand in hand to try to create more of a supportive world, a supportive environment, because we are all connected to each other.
Yes, that's so true. Mm-hmm. I love the puzzle piece thing. I used to talk to my students. Well, maybe I still do in my college teaching, mm-hmm. but I remember I did this with high school students specifically to say every one of you everybody that lives has a specific genius.
Mm-hmm.
It might be that you're just the best friend in the world and that's your genius. Yeah. Or, it could be something like you're a really great gardener but you mm-hmm. define what your genius is. And that's why you go to school. That's one of the reasons you go to school is to explore different ideas and different things, different ways of being, different perspectives and attitudes. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they would look at me like their eyes would get bigger, like she thinks we're geniuses.
Yeah. I mean, you're a prodigy. You're a prodigy of something.
That's right. Yes. And I remember in one of your TED Talks, you were talking about failure. And I like to say there are no mistakes. Nope. It's only lessons.
Setbacks. That's what I like to call them. There are
Yeah.
no failures. It's all
Yeah.
setbacks.
And even if it's a setback, it's just a lesson. There's something to learn from that. So I was like, oh, Sam and I kind of think alike.
Mm-hmm. We do. I mean, I've always said obstacles are the necessary bricks on a road to success. Like, don't fear the obstacles, embrace them, because those are your setbacks. And when it's a setback, it's different than a failure. A failure is final. A setback means you get back up, dust yourself off, learn from the experience, and you emerge that much stronger.
Right.
It's given you the skills and the abilities. If you don't have the obstacles or the setbacks, you won't know what the other side of the coin is. And I always tell people it's weird. I thrive in ambiguity and uncertainty.
Oh, I love
and that's an environment which people fear. And I'm like, no, I'm in ambiguity and uncertainty. I love so many people can tell me what the problem is. No. There's an opportunity to come to a solution. And I'm always in that mode of, okay, I love the problem because it allows me to try to vision what a solution might be.
I love that. Yes. Oh my, I've enjoyed our conversation so much. So any last parting thoughts before I say thank you for being my guest?
Well, I really value and appreciate what you're doing because you're really giving people a voice, helping them realize a voice. My favorite quote that I live by, and it's been quoted by so many of my students in graduation ceremonies in the past, is everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. You are a living autobiography. Realize that you have much to contribute to this world and that you're part of someone's bigger piece or puzzle. And just keep going out there and realizing your life journey.
Yes, I love that. I liked, when you had that in your TED Talk, I said, oh, that's so great. I love that. Well, thank you, Sam. I've enjoyed our conversation so much.
Thank you, Lucinda. And I wish you all the best. And, I look forward to more conversations.
Oh, good. Yes. And I have to go back up to British Columbia at some point. It's so beautiful up there.
It is.
Yes. Well, you take care.
Thank you. And you too.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.